The price of ambition. Samantha Moore had it all. Or so everyone thought. A corner office in one of Chicago's tallest skyscrapers, a wardrobe that could make a fashion editor weep, and the kind of confidence that turned heads the moment she entered a room. At 37, she was the youngest vice president at the firm and had the accolades to prove it. But as she sat at her desk, staring out over the city she had conquered, her thoughts drifted to a life she had left behind. It was an evening 7 years ago, a summer night in her hometown of Cedar Grove. The air had been thick with the scent of wildflowers, and the soft hum of cicadas filled the silence. She had just told Daniel Carter, the man she had loved since she was 19, that she was leaving for Chicago. "It's my dream, Danny. You understand, don't you?" she had said, her voice trembling with both hope and fear. Daniel's response was as steady as ever, his deep brown eyes fixed on hers. "I understand, Sam, but dreams have a cost." He hadn't begged her to stay. He hadn't made grand promises or dramatic gestures. Instead, he had kissed her one last time, the kind of kiss that seared itself into her memory, and let her go. 7 years later, Samantha still felt the ghost of that kiss. Her phone buzzed, snapping her back to reality. It was a message from her assistant. "Don't forget, board meeting at 3 p.m. Samantha sighed and leaned back in her chair. She had everything she had ever wanted, so why did it feel so hollow? That evening, as she walked back to her apartment, Samantha's steps slowed in front of a small cafe. The warm glow of the lights and the sound of soft jazz spilling out onto the street drew her in. She ordered a glass of wine and sat by the window, watching the world move around her. She didn't notice the man who had entered until he spoke her name. "Sam?" Her heart skipped a beat. She turned to see Daniel standing there, older but just as devastatingly handsome. His hair was a little grayer at the temples, his face slightly more weathered, but his eyes held the same steady warmth. "Danny?" Her voice wavered. He smiled, and for a moment, it felt like no time had passed at all. They talked for hours. Daniel had moved to Chicago 3 years ago to open a woodworking shop. "Custom furniture," he explained. "Not exactly skyscrapers, but it pays the bills." Samantha laughed, a genuine laugh she hadn't heard from herself in years. As the night wore on, the conversation grew more personal. "Do you ever think about Cedar Grove?" he asked. Her smile faltered. "All the time." "And me?" His voice was soft, almost hesitant. She looked down at her glass, the weight of his question pressing against her chest. "More than I should," she admitted. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Samantha and Daniel fell into an easy rhythm, meeting for coffee, dinners, and long walks by the lake. It was like picking up a book she had put down years ago, only to find the story even better than she remembered. But with every stolen moment, Samantha felt the pull of her old life. The late nights at the office, the endless deadlines, the expectations. She had built her entire identity around her career. Could she really walk away from it now? One night, after a particularly heated board meeting, Samantha showed up at Daniel's workshop unannounced. The smell of sawdust and varnish filled the air, and Daniel was bent over a piece of oak, his hands moving with practiced ease. He looked up, surprised but pleased to see her. "Rough day?" he asked. She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore, Danny." He set down his tools and pulled her into his arms. "You don't have to figure it all out tonight." That night, as they lay tangled in each other's arms, Samantha traced the lines of his face, committing every detail to memory. "What if I'm too late?" she whispered. Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "It's never too late, Sam, but you have to decide what you really want." The next morning, Samantha stood in front of her bathroom mirror, her reflection a stark reminder of the choices she had made. She thought about the awards on her office wall, the late nights, the sacrifices. And then she thought about Daniel, his steady presence, his unwavering support. By the time she arrived at work, she had made her decision. 2 weeks later, Samantha handed in her resignation. Her colleagues were shocked. "You're at the top of your game," her boss had said. "Why would you walk away now?" Samantha's answer was simple. Because I've been climbing the wrong mountain." She moved into a small apartment above Daniel's workshop, trading her designer suits for jeans and flannel shirts. She started helping him with the business, discovering a love for creating something tangible with her hands. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Daniel took her hand. "Do you regret it?" he asked. Samantha shook her head, a smile spreading across her face. "Not for a second." As the last rays of sunlight dipped below the horizon, Samantha leaned into Daniel's embrace, finally at peace with the choices that had led her back to the man she had never stopped loving.